So I want to welcome you all to our live discussion with faculty. This one's around a virtual engineering capstone, and I'm very happy to introduce or welcome our facilitators. We have four people who are really excited about this topic and have a lot of knowledge and experience to share. We have Beth DeBartolo from Rochester Institute of Technology, Jay Goldberg from Marquette University, Bob Rhodes from the Ohio State University, and Yannis Yortsos from the University of Southern California. And so I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to our facilitators, and I will be manning the chat. If you have questions during the initial part of the conversation, go ahead and throw those in the chat, and I'll be taking a look for those, and then we'll open up for conversation after our facilitators share their thoughts.
Great, thank you. Am I coming through okay? Sometimes I have audio problems. You can hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So we got together Friday and we thought we would get started by each of us taking a couple minutes just to explain the way we've handled taking our capstone programs online. So I can see Bob in front of me. So Bob, do you want to start?
Sure, I can start. Again, I'm Bob Rhodes. I'm the director of the multidisciplinary capstone program here at Ohio State. I typically have around 70 to 80 students per year. It's a 2-semester course sequence. It starts in the autumn and continues through spring. We have all industry-sponsored projects, and we typically run around 15 industry-sponsored projects per year with a few different companies. Some companies sponsor multiple projects. So in spring semester, about halfway through, our students are typically in that finishing up their physical prototype and validating it through testing and refining it. So when when it came down with Ohio State of canceling the in-person classes and closing down the campus, the students were right at spring break, which again, they were right in the heat of getting their physical prototype finished up and testing and validating. So there's a couple things that we are trying to do is, one, keep up with our sponsors, since we have industry-funded projects, keeping up with those agreements and those deliverables, but at the same time, the students are working virtually. They're having meetings through Zoom, just like this one, amongst themselves, amongst their project advisors, as well as their sponsors. We've really focused on whatever they can do through CAD, FEA, CFD, any kind of modeling they can do to encourage that. Our campus has been able to VPN them in to campus software packages, and then work on their final documentation, because we basically end the semester about the end of April. So we have about 3, maybe 4 weeks left in the semester for them to complete the project. But we're really having them focus on the documentation and looking forward to what would they have done if they were on campus, as well as what their next steps would be in the project. So it's a challenge like we all are facing, but that's kind of how we're dealing with it right now in our capstone in multidisciplinary at OSU. I'll pass it off to Jay then.
Okay, thanks. Our situation in Marquette University is very similar to Bob's in terms that it's a 1-year, 2-semester sequence, and our students are 3/4 of the way through their prototypes through the course. And then spring break, they were told not to come back. And so that's where we are. So I realized a couple weeks ago that, so I have 21 projects that I'm responsible for in the biomedical engineering group here. And I advise 4 of those myself, and I have faculty volunteers to advise the other 17. But I realized for those 17 that I normally don't meet with, I see them twice a week in class, and if I don't meet with them virtually, basically I'll never see them again. because graduation's been pushed off to July and August, and we don't know who's going to actually participate. So I've been meeting with the teams every other week. So every other week I'm trying to hold 21 half-hour long meetings. And it's a lot of time, but it's great, and students seem to appreciate it. At least they get to talk to somebody, and I get to see them and make sure they're doing okay. And I've asked them, once all this stuff started, to assess how far they could get in their projects, with the resource constraints they're faced with. Our makerspace, our Discovery Learning Lab, is closed. A lot of them had their prototype parts locked up in there. So I spent the first week trying to figure out how we can get some alternate resources to them. We had a local makerspace. They said your students can come and use our facilities. Now I'm thinking it's not such a great idea because we can't control how many people are there. So with this whole social distancing requirement, I'm not sure that's a feasible option. It seemed feasible a few weeks ago. But also, we've been able to get them SolidWorks licenses so they can continue their design work on their laptops at home. We have, for students that are still on campus, and half are at home, half are on campus, they're opening up our engineering building to let them retrieve whatever prototype parts they had. And they have a procedure to follow, one student at a time, and there's certain rules they have to follow. But we're doing whatever we can to try to get them what they need to, basically, to be successful. And I've also asked the teams, this is my concern. I don't want them to give up. I don't want them to use this as an excuse or feel that, well, we can't get to our makerspace, we can't get our parts, I guess it's over. There's a lot they can do. So when I meet with them, I'm asking them, how far do you think you can get? And I'm looking for an honest assessment. I don't want anybody saying, well, let's just tell them we can't do anything, and then our scope of our project is now changed and we're done and we can relax. I want them to, we talk about, if they say, well, I can't do this, I propose some ways of getting around that. Some of them will say, well, I can't build my circuit because I don't have a soldering iron. I said, well, order one. If you feel comfortable, go to a local home improvement store and buy them. If not, order one on Amazon, which I've been told now is pretty slow in delivery. But anyway, we're trying to work through some of these options. So my goal is for them to tell me as far as how far can you get, and we talk about for each of the remaining course deliverables, what that might look like if you can't do everything that you thought you were going to. If your prototype doesn't end up looking the way you thought it would a few months ago, tell me what it can look like. Or if you can't do a prototype, can you do a computer simulation? Can you do something else? So we talk about that so that we'll rescope the projects, but there's still a challenge there. And the other thing I think that's important in all this is we have to be willing to be very flexible and accommodating with the grading. If they truly can't reach certain goals, okay, then if they can justify that, explain why. And we're doing the same thing that Bob mentioned, where in their final report, if you weren't able to get to a certain point, tell us how you would have gotten there, had you had the resources, so that maybe a team next year can pick up from where you left off. And the last thing I'll mention is we have a mix. I'd say we have a third industry-sponsored projects, a third devices for people with disabilities, and a third kind of a mixture of other type, more research-based type projects, equipment for people's labs, things like that. And our industry sponsors are pretty good. They understand, look, the rules are different. We may not get a functional prototype. We may not get something. We may get something we have to run a second year of the project to get done. So that's what we're doing at Marquette. And now I'm not sure who's next, Beth.
Sure, I'll go. So I'm Beth. I'm in the multidisciplinary senior design program at RIT. We've got biomedical, computer, electrical, industrial, and mechanical engineers working together. I've got about 500 students. 400 of those started in the fall and they're finishing up now. So they were in the situation that Jay and Bob were describing. I've got another roughly 100 who started their projects in January and they're scheduled to finish in the fall. We don't offer a summer section of our Capstone course, so our spring students finish up in the fall. So I've got students in two stages. The folks who were in the first semester of their Capstone, honestly, they're in pretty good shape because they're doing design work, they're doing a little bit of proof of concept prototyping, and we're able to let them purchase some critical components for, feasibility testing, just to keep the project moving. But we're fingers crossed, right? We're hoping they'll be back on campus in the fall and they'll be able to continue the main part of their build the way we normally would. So then the tricky part was with, like Jay and Bob said, with the students who were supposed to be finishing up now, same sort of timing. The students were on spring break and, campus administration said, don't come back. So they literally just left stuff sitting out on workbenches as if they were going to come back and start working on it again. So the focus that we've taken has really been, and the clients have been very understanding. The focus has been, how do you still deliver something of value to your client, right? So can you give them the best set of engineering drawings and electrical schematics that you possibly can? So take the time, instead of rushing through the prototyping, letting the documentation slide, deliver the best drawing package you can, deliver the best manufacturing and test plans that you can, because the reality is someone else is going to finish up this work if it's going to continue. And then we've also got them thinking about, if the project is going to continue, can I write up the project proposal for the next team that's going to pick up where we left off? So they've dealt remarkably well with it. The students have handled all the virtual teleconferencing without, I would say, better than some of us have, because I think they use this sort of technology more often, and they've really stepped up. I mean, we've seen a lot of very professional behavior in the work that they've done. But again, the focus is how can you keep going and deliver something of value to your clients? And I know one of the questions that I have, and I'm sure all of you have questions, but I'll tell you, one of the things that I'm struggling with is we have all these prototype materials left over now. And I would love to hear what other folks think in terms of, what are you going to do with all this stuff that's left behind when your campus is open back up again, right? The students are gone and all this stuff is left. So I think Yannis was going to talk about your National Academies.
Right, something related. So thank you very much. I'm a late addition to this. I will talk to you a little bit about a program that we just announced by the National Academy of Engineering, and I will explain what this is about and how this can perhaps interface or play along with the Capstone design. I want to tell you a few things before that about engineering at USC, University of Southern California. We have about, maybe 500, 600 seniors, and all of them take, obviously, Capstone design right now. All degrees all majors are represented from CS, EE, electrical, environmental, civil, chemical, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, I noticed that my colleague, Eric Johnson, who is Vice Dean for Academic Programs, is also in attendance, and he can tell you more about what in this area and all the challenges and the opportunities that we have. And overall, the challenges and opportunity of online programs, online attendance, and wanted to also just throw in there that this provides us the opportunity to develop character among our students as well, plus a mindset of agility and adaptability and entrepreneurial mindset in some way on how to deal with the situation. And so that's something that is a unique opportunity, and hopefully it's not going to continue for too long, but certainly on how our students behave in an environment that's remote and
you hit the arrow inside. How many arrows do you have to hit to get the end?
I'm sorry. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. So thank you. So that's the other part, I think, that is being tested in this environment. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the National Academy of Engineering project. So about, as some of you know, there is something called the Grand Challenges Scholars Program. This is something that started back in 2009. Many universities have this program, and essentially emphasizes or perhaps helps create engineers that address big grand challenges. At USC, we have a chapter of about 15. We graduate about 30 or so every year. So the idea was how we can energize the Grand Challenge scholars to address the COVID-19 crisis. So on March 30th, the Academy launched an initiative which essentially consists of a virtual incubator. And the idea is that people come up with ideas, then they are screened according to the maturity of these ideas. Some ideas are, I want to help. Some ideas say, hey, I have this idea that if you do this and this, you'll create that. And some ideas are, I have already a product, can you help me take it to, to fight the coronavirus situation? So this influx of ideas is then triaged according to these three categories. And then we bring in the I-Core, Innovation Core program of the National Science Foundation to teach this and develop these themes in a very compressed, accelerated pace, perhaps no more than a week, which then can take this idea to the next level and possibly then connect them to people that do venture capital or the government or industry, therefore, and address the coronavirus crisis, as well as post-coronavirus environment, because the ideas are not to be only to arrest the contagion, but also life after the coronavirus. So far, we have received about 300 different ideas. MIT just finished a hackathon this past weekend, and they're going to send their teams in our direction as well, because in a way we provide, the National Academy provided training on a virtual basis, and then essentially push these people out and these ideas out into possibly the marketplace. So maybe there are some ideas in your own capstone design courses that perhaps can also benefit from this. I just bring it about out here. There's a website. If you go to the NAE, National Academy of Engineering website, then you will see, how you can be connected to the program. We invite people from all over, and we think that's an interesting and different opportunity. And maybe in the future, it will be for other grand challenge types, let's say sustainability, climate, other things as well. So essentially bring bright kids involved into interesting things, and then if they want to participate in this virtual incubator. So it's something that we're testing. Hopefully the National Science Foundation will support it as well in a different way. And that's actually what I thought I should bring it up to your attention, and I'll be happy to discuss more about how we do that. Thank you.
Great, thank you everyone for giving a quick introduction and sharing what your schools are doing. We have a lot of conversations happening in the chat, so I also want to thank all the attendees for sharing what they have going on their campuses as well. There's a lot of activity in the chat right now to respond to the question, what are schools doing in place of final in-person Capstone Expo? So there's a lot happening in the chat. If there's anyone who wants to jump in and share what they're doing for that, that would be great.
Hi. This is Matt Bohm from Florida Polytechnic. I'm our Director of Industry Engagement and Capstone Projects, and we have about 250 seniors in our entire university doing multidisciplinary capstones. They're primarily industry-based. We are working with the company BISC, which is out of Tampa, Florida. They currently specialize in online learning, and they are working to build out an online showcase platform as we speak. And I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like, but it's going to leverage some of our learning management systems and Behance, which is a portfolio sharing tool.
This is Jay Goldberg. Can you put that information on the chat or our website or something?
Yeah, sure. I'll put that in the chat. Okay.
And because that's really interesting to hear, because at Marquette we basically canceled our design day, but what we've discussed was I don't know if anybody else is doing this, an optional online, basically a website where students would put their final oral presentations to be recorded, and they would people could view them. But the problem we're having is that because we know that so many of these projects are not going to be completed, and they're not necessarily what the students would consider their best work. Some of them may not want them showcased. And I have to be very careful of how I phrase that, because I don't want to send the message that, well, we don't want to showcase your stuff if you didn't, finish it all the way. So we're giving teams the option of whether they want to showcase it or not.
Hi,
Hello.
this is Dean Knudsen. Can I don't know when I jump in or not.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of things. So I'm at North Dakota State University, and we do about 85, 90 students every spring, but it's in computer science, so it's a little different than most of you guys. And computer science makes it quite a lot easier than most other groups because we don't have the hardware issues. But one of the things I wanted to mention, we do the same thing as Jay was talking about. We have these half-hour meetings with the students. And so we have 21 teams, and we try to schedule, and they're scattered all over the place now. So in order to schedule those meetings, what we found works really quite well is to tell the student teams, figure out times you can work together, and then pull up the Outlook schedule, the Outlook calendar. There's 2 of us teaching the course. Pull up the 2 of our calendars, look at that, and then drop in, try to schedule a meeting with us, and then everybody on all those 21 teams can see when the meetings are filling up and when the blank spots are coming. So that's worked really well for us.
Hi, this is John Persichetti from the Colorado School of Mines, and we've struggled with the Capstone showcase also, but we were fortunate in that we're able through our website to build, let our Information Technology Services group build a template web page for each team, and then they're given administrator access rights to that website, can upload a video clip, a summary, any drawings that they have, a variety of artifacts with their project. And our program is remarkably similar to what Beth described at RIT. We have mechanical, electrical, civil, environmental, and a general engineering program. So 5 disciplines. It's multidisciplinary. I think we have 56 teams lining up, and we'll have judging and sending out links to the judges. So each judge will look at 4 project teams and be able to provide judging that way. We struggled with having judges be able to talk to the students directly and decided against that through the Zoom connections or any other form would be pretty stressful for the students. So we're emphasizing that they really make sure that what they're putting on their web page is a good reflection of where they're at, and tell them, go ahead and describe where you were going with your project and what road bumps this caused with not being able to complete it and how they're trying to respond. It's a way of them reflecting professionalism in just a complete change of course for some of their projects. Thanks.
Can I just bring up one item that showed up in the comments that I think is worth sharing with everybody? Is somebody commented on if you're switching stuff that used to be done in person to an online format, make sure the teams are reviewing that with their sponsors to make sure they're not violating any
Yes.
IP agreements that they had, so that the sponsors agree with what's being disclosed publicly.
Yes, and we're doing the same thing with ours, where we have NDA agreements or an IP transfer to make sure that the sponsor approves it beforehand.
I'll just add,
This is Malcolm Daniels.
We're talking about putting things out online like everybody else, but we've been told we need to have FERPA sign off for having the students if they appear on any of these videos.
This is Willoughby. I'm from Morgan State University. How's everybody doing? Called to ask a quick question. How are you guys handling students actually feeling a product that they're trying to describe over the electronic system? Meaning if you were, for example, trying to show them the minerals that are on Mars, the advantages of the minerals that we can extract from Mars, etc., how do you kind of encompass that to have the students get that real laboratory feeling?
I had a hard time hearing the question because you cut in and out a
I'm
little
sorry.
bit. Could,
I'm just asking whether or not how you actually give your capstone, how do you actually give students a good feeling of touching the experiment over electronically? How do you give them a good feeling of really feeling that particular experiment that they can look at experimentally and theoretically?
For us, a lot of our deliverables are a physical product. And so we've told the students, we asked them to do a photo archive of where they were at. And so they're able to show photos of whatever the build process was, and then to extend it through simulations, detailed drawings, and to describe the concept of taking the project forward, what their plans were, and then an analysis of how should this perform, doing more calculation-based or simulation-based extension of what was the physical product build.
Makes sense. And no way in any of your feats, you're not using any robotics to control the experiment remotely, and they're doing that with wind tunnels now, where they're controlling the wind tunnels remotely. Students will, have the wind tunnel actually set up over the internet and run the experiment they want. So I'm just curious on whether you guys have got into that yet or not, robotics.
We told the students they needed to cease any sort of extension that would require them to be on campus or to work in groups. And so they, across the board, said unless you have something in your personal possession at home that you can work with and that the team can collaborate on in that remote setting, that we're not expecting them to be able to do anything robotic-wise or otherwise.
Thank you.
Yep.
was there anything in the virtual lab session that you posted last week that might be relevant to help answer this question?
Yes, Beth, that's great. I was actually just getting ready to post the link to the video from the virtual engineering labs discussion we had last week in the chat. There was some demo done of a product that allows students to connect virtually to an existing lab. So that might be beneficial to you, Arthur, and
Yes.
others who are looking for that. I'll share that link in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
It looks like Thor just posted it.
Thank you, Thor.
Your lab, this is one last question. You have an aerospace program now, don't you? Aerospace engineering program also at your school? I mean, I saw some people for Colorado State Mines. If you can hear me, you may not can hear me. I'm not sure.
The School of Mines does not have aerospace. We
Yes.
have aerospace projects, but not an aerospace degree program for
But
undergraduates.
you have one on campus, though, an aerospace program on campus somewhere.
We do, but it's a graduate program and several projects that are supporting that program.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Do you know whether or not they're using any virtual labs within their department?
I do not.
Thank you. I only ask that reluctantly because I'm an aerospace engineer doing aerospace at Morgan, fluid dynamics. Was just curious on how far they got ahead.
Oh.
Thank you.
Great. We have a question in the chat from Heather Moore. How are capstone programs whose projects are funded by industry thinking they're going to handle asking sponsors to return as sponsors next year, since we couldn't complete their deliverables? And I know we talked a little bit about managing expectations with sponsors, but wondering if anyone can add to that discussion.
So here at Poly, we have the industry sponsors, but I kind of want to say that we're going to have a set of different types of projects next year that are primarily more in response to the crisis. So I'm not really concerned about those sponsors that we currently have, and maybe things not working out for them.
At Ohio State, I have that same concern because I have some sponsors already asking me, because we have contracts with each of our sponsors that are funding these projects with regards to what was the original commitment deliverables versus what the students can deliver at the end of the semester. And I've kind of try to put them at ease to say we need to evaluate each project on an individual basis at the end of the semester. But I do have that concern because I do have one sponsor that sponsors multiple projects for us is already asking that question, and I'd like to hear some responses too.
If it helps, I'm working with the lead professor at CU. I've spoken to a lot of people that have done this before, as I have, with different schools. And two observations. One is people in industry seem to be suffering as much or more than in terms of their schedule, their development plans, etc. The people who seem to be more, the people that seem to be more, perhaps more difficult to talk through this with are usually new sponsors. Their scope is pretty ambitious for a capstone project. So those are my two observations for what it's worth.
Yeah, this is Keith Stanfill here from University of Tennessee. One thing I think is really crucial in the agreements that you have with your sponsor companies is, typically all we can promise is a best effort basis for our students. And I would encourage you to have some language like that in whatever type of agreement, contract, or letter that you provide to the sponsors. I mean, this is absolutely unprecedented times. So I think it's pretty crucial that we have a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, Keith, this is Jen Carlson from the University of Michigan, and I agree, our contracts have that language. We actually started in January, we'll finish in December, so we're a little less worried about what our students might be able to deliver then. My concern more is now is the time I'm supposed to be signing my sponsors up for next January. So kind of back to that other question, how do I contact industries that are shuttered or losing money and see how they want us to sponsor our students going forward? I don't know if anyone else has thought about that.
Hi, this is Nicole Bailey from Cal State Fullerton. I'm the Director of Development for the College of Engineering and Computer Science. And we have a corporate partners program. And to Jennifer's point, yes, that right now is the time when we will be recruiting for fall. And so we are not doing a ton of new prospect research per se. Instead, what we're trying to do is wrap up these projects as the best way possible, the same way that a lot of you are discussing theoretically, and providing as much material back to the sponsor as we can, and then moving forward with those discussions as we get into June, as it looks like maybe, hopefully, things might be a little more settled and we can start talking about the following year. Our program is run philanthropically. So we obviously are going to have to look at the level of sponsorship if we're going to be continuing a project that was unable to be completed this year. We're going to have to consider taking that into next year, and then what that actually looks like on the funding side. So as has already been mentioned, we are certainly in uncharted territory, and we're kind of just doing it on the fly, making it up as we go. But we're really trying to keep the communication lines with the sponsors as open as we can.
Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Becky Bless from the University of Dayton. We do a capstone sequence, Design 1 and a Design 2 class. Design 1 is all the way up to through conceptualization, paper design, and the 2 is the traditional design build test. Ironically enough, I met with my staff this morning to go over our project list. We have about 75 sponsors. And about 20 with the community sponsors. Typically, we do those projects pro bono. The industry sponsors, however, we took on a case-by-case basis where we looked at each one and decided, we put them into categories. Either, yes, we keep it the same as the agreement price, or we modify it, or we wait and see at the end of the semester. The project have the projects that are electrical or that are heavily coding involve more of that, rather than the mechanical are the ones that are the most, were the least undisturbed. The mechanicals, unless the students took the parts with them and they have some ability to do some prototyping in their garages, seems to be an anomaly, and we have very few students that did that, but we have a few.
There are a lot of students who have 3D printers, so I know we've heard about quite a few teams who have said they've been able to salvage something and print maybe non-functional prototypes, but at least enough to get a sense for the dynamics and the kinematics.
So can I ask a question? This is Rob Ryan from Temple, and one of the issues we've been discussing is at Temple, the students were sent home. They were told they're not allowed to come back to campus. And we went back and forth over what to do about prototypes. Some people argued that we should let students build whatever they can if they can do it at home, and honestly, they're not even allowed to get together if one person could do it. Other people said that it's really not fair because those teams will end up with will be advantaged over the teams who, for no fault of their own, couldn't build anything. We ended up going with this idea of I mean, I basically told our faculty, be as flexible as you need to be and do what you think is right. I'm wondering how other people have dealt with that issue where some teams are able to build and others aren't, and how that assessment is.
I think,
Go ahead.
I think anybody who advises capstone teams has to have some basic capability to use some discretion when they're assigning grades. So I'm sure the students are concerned with, being treated unfairly because they can't prototype. But when you're running a program where you've got 20, 30, 40, 100 different projects, folks who are giving the grades are, have the ability to use some discretion and make an effort not to penalize students who aren't able to do the prototyping. And at the same time, give credit to the students who took advantage of the opportunities that presented themselves to keep their project moving.
Yeah, I strongly recommend that approach too. That that's one of the purposes I'm talking with each team, to try to get a feel. We have a few software-based projects and they're fine. They're on schedule, no problem. They can do that remotely. So I expect them to do that. But other teams, when we talk about where they're located and whether they can work at all on anything or advance at all, what some of the alternative deliverables could be, we're gonna make adjustments in the grading. We're not going to hold them to the same requirements that's a team that can build a prototype can. So basically I'm looking at, it's on a project by project basis. Each one has a different, can reach a certain endpoint, and they'll be graded on, if they end up doing what it is that they can do. And I should mention that to me, in terms of meeting the course learning objectives, I'm actually right now I'm more concerned with how they respond to this as opposed to what that final prototype looks like. And that may sound like heresy to some programs, but to me, this is a real life, real-time experiment or an experience in contingency planning and resource management and that kind of thing. And so this kind of fits in and supports the entrepreneurial mindset that's supported by the Keene, the Kern Family Foundation. But one of the things we're asking them to do in their final report is write up a page of what type of alternate resources did you look for? What avenues did you take to try to overcome some of these barriers, and what was the result? And if they've shown evidence that they've tried some things and it's still not working, we're going to adjust the grading. We are really trying to reduce their stress level. And that doesn't mean, we're just going to accept anything, but we have students that they're at home and they're competing for bandwidth with their parents that are at home working, or their parents lost their jobs and they're looking for a job, and they've asked the college student to watch the siblings. And there's all these additional demands on our students' time. So we're trying to be as flexible as possible.
And Robert, this is Kurt Stressoff from the University of Central Florida in Mechanical and Aerospace.
Part of what you cued in on was the student emotion and how they feel about being evaluated differently. The approach that I took for my course a couple of weeks ago was to flip the script and have the student project teams formally propose a project completion plan so that they would have ownership of whatever their end product looked like, and that they would include, as Jay has pointed out, any unusual personal circumstances, whether or not they had access to facilities, whether or not they didn't have access to the internet, because we have students scattered now all over the country as they left for spring break. And so asking the students to propose a project completion plan gave them ownership of what that looked like and allowed them to negotiate that with the faculty member who was evaluating their work to make sure that it was reasonable and consistent with the educational objectives. And so, yes, different teams are going to have different deliverables, but they're going to have them because they proposed them. And with approval and blessing of the faculty member who was overseeing their work.
I should mention something somewhat separate but parallel to this, which is our student groups that deal with all kinds of activities, and they actually are very much appreciating this part of their education, which is unsupervised in some sense. For example, our rocket propulsion lab team, they go there and fire rockets and all that, or the car racing team and all that. They are, in fact, also disappointed by the fact that they cannot do what they're supposed to do. So it's parallel to what we do here, although it is activity that is driven almost entirely by students. There is a nominal professor who supervises their activities, but what I find is that the enthusiasm about the students is actually very strong, and they can come up with all kinds of interesting ideas to be able to either reconvene for the future in ways by which they make up for the lost ground. And so in some way, the capstone design is sort of a requirement for a class that students have to take to pass or get credit for their degree. The student teams are not, but actually you see a lot of interesting ideas and enthusiasm that comes from that. So we may want to tap on that enthusiasm and see how we can actually learn from what they do. I see the same thing in the entries in the National Academy contest. They don't talk about limitations, but actually they talk about what they want to do something better. And so it seems to me that we have to capitalize on the enthusiasm of the students about that.
Excuse me, I heard you say something about rockets, buying rockets or either simulating rockets. Is that what you said? Rockets?
We have an effort at USC for quite a while now in which people build solid propulsion rockets.
Yes.
And they go and then they launch them in space.
Yes, we're doing liquid, and we're after that same thing at Morgan. We want the liquid just to do some basic stuff. And I was just curious. You're from the aerospace program there, is that right? I'm
the Dean of Engineering.
Okay, good. I may call you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I got a question. I know at UCF, the dean has asked for formation of 3 different task force. One is on transition of lecture-based classes to more virtual mode. Second one is on lab courses and having virtual lab courses, which we mentioned earlier. And the third one is specifically on senior design and looking at the successes that we had over the spring and the transition, and looking forward to the summer and what we need to do and what we can do further. I'd be interested in knowing, are other universities, are the administration supporting, in particular, the people in Capstone senior design on this at this point in time?
This is Jay Goldberg. On your last point there, we've gotten a few faculty members, like the people that run our Discovery Learning Lab, and that the people left in our engineering hall, our building, they've agreed to be available to either let students in the building one at a time to retrieve their parts in the lab. And we also have another faculty member who's actually, he is lending out, he's willing to lend out with one person at a time, one representative from the team, and they have to be on campus obviously to do this, but he's lending out soldering irons and even some test equipment. The students sign an agreement that they'll bring it back by May 1st, you know, and it's still functional and all that. So we are getting support from other people within the College of Engineering here to help us, you know, overcome some of these barriers.
Are you getting any support from your distributed learning people?
Oh yeah, ours is called Center for Teaching and Learning, and we were told, not asked, we were told the week right after spring break that we'd be spending that week learning how to transition from, you know, in class to online teaching. So I learned about using Microsoft Teams and a bunch of other software tools, and how to do voiceover PowerPoints to replace live lectures. We have a lot of, in our senior design class, we have a lot of lectures, and a lot of them are guest speakers. So we had that extra level of trying to ask people outside the university if they're willing to spend the time to learn how to do a voiceover PowerPoint. And some of these we're going to do live for if it's a small class, but our senior design, we have two sections. The first section, since we include all these different disciplines, it's got 120, 130 people in it, and we were concerned about bandwidth demand, you know, for giving a live presentation and all that, because some of our students don't have the best quality internet connection. So that's why we're being urged to do as much asynchronous as possible. But we're getting a lot of support from the Center for Teaching and Learning with all sorts of workshops and seminars, and then meetings to talk about tips, what's working, what's not. So yeah, we are getting a lot of support from that group.
There have been a few questions that have come up related to summer and fall and how folks are handling either a summer kickoff or a summer finish, which I can imagine is a little bit different, right? So right now we're all in a situation where we started in person and had this massive switch to virtual over a 2-week period. For summer and potentially fall, you're looking at a situation where now you have the luxury of planning ahead of time. So how are folks handling either kickoff projects that start in the summertime or projects that are moving into their build and test phase in the summertime?
So this decision came from actually juniors. Hi, this is Sid from University of Pennsylvania. You know, we are currently trying to meet up with juniors so they can start building teams. A lot of juniors have also got their internship offers on hold. They don't know when they can start or they will start. So they actually have free time over summer. And a lot of juniors said, look, if we are not meet for a class where a lot of team bonding may happen in person, would you allow us to take a class that's more useful? You know, a lot of our projects has data analytics in the end. You know, could we replace Senior Design 1 with a class that will actually help our project where we can build up core skills? And of course, you know, with the faculty, that didn't go very well because that requires changing a lot of curriculum planning guide. But just wanted to kind of pass that question. I don't know what to do, and I did not have an answer for that question.
So our Capstone class, we use a flipped classroom model, and I saw a couple other people in the comments had said the same thing, and that lends itself really well to switching to online because we've already got pre-recorded videos. But, you know, a student who's taking the initiative to say, here are some topics that I want to learn about might be an interesting combination, right? So do your design instruction that's required, but hey, that sounds a lot like lifelong learning. So if they want to come up with a learning plan for themselves in support of their project on top of the content that needs to be covered in the capstone, seems like that's something that you could take advantage of and help the students understand, you know, this is a skill that you do want to foster for when you go out into the real world.
Great. There are a number of questions in the chat, and I want to thank everyone for sharing responses as we go. We have Beth, I don't know if you can see that most current question: what practices have you been forced into because of the situation that you would propose be incorporated into standard practice going forward when things return to normal? I think that's a great question to think about, because we are hearing a lot about this is the new normal. Things will not return back to the way they were. So what do we need to accept and change?
We've moved. Oh, go ahead.
From University of Central Florida. I mean, we've been very fortunate to have a very strong distributed learning program at the university. And although, interestingly enough, senior design has been, very lecture oriented and hands-on, prototyping, all that good stuff. At least from my perspective, my feeling is that this has all been good. There's a lot of good elements of this in terms of moving forward. It's not, and whether or not, the pandemic lasts for a year or more or whatever happens, we're learning a new way of doing business that will benefit all of us. If students don't all have to come to campus every single moment, if we can meet remotely, especially at a place like UCF where we have over 60,000 students, it's all good. I mean, the students are very adept at, as was mentioned, working remotely, working with Discord or Slack or whatever platform. They're fine with it, and as long as it's all good, virtual learning.
We've moved a lot of our peer review stuff to a virtual environment. So we used to do an in-person paper exchange and in-person peer review of posters. And we've had to shift it online. And we were just talking yesterday, we realized this is actually working a whole lot better than the in-person version. So that's something that we've learned in the course of this, that it is a benefit to us.
Yeah, creating these asynchronous presentations is, in a way, I am kind of being forced to do that initial work that's needed to switch to a hybrid class. That's what I've been resisting. Say, well, I have to put all these things on, record them, but we're doing that now. So this is another, makes it, it's one step closer to converting to a hybrid format, if that's what we want to do. And last thing I want to mention is, we require our students to do, in addition to a project schedule in February, in the second semester, a detailed project schedule. We asked them to do a risk assessment, basically list the things, what events, what could happen that might threaten your on-time delivery, your on-time schedule completion of your project. And not one of the students listed a global pandemic as a potential threat to their projects back in February. And the lesson to be learned that I shared with the students is that no matter how much you try to predict things, you can't come up with it. You can't think of everything that could happen. And that's just part of life. And that happens in industry too. So there are some valuable real world life lessons to learn in this experience.
Yeah, this may not be something new for everybody. This is Jen again from the University of Michigan. But we used to have, when we were in person, we had office hours for the students to come prior to large assignments and ask feedback from us on the assignments. And it worked pretty well. Students would show up, they wouldn't show up. I'd sometimes sit in my office and wait. And in this new scenario, I used a tool called Calendly, which I can put in the chat, which accesses my Google Calendar directly. So I can leave open space, and students were able to just pick 20-minute time slots. And I've had so many students respond really well to that and call in to talk to me about their assignments and other things. So that's something we may, look at keeping in the future, because the students seem to respond well to it.
I wanted to add one more sort of a not tangent, but aspect to this as well. Some of our capstone design projects involve solving societal issues like homeless and things like that. And so this new environment also is something that would hamper the way by which we address these issues. Some of our students visit, areas where trying to innovate based on societal issues out there. And we expect that this also will hamper the way we do business or this type of courses next semester. This semester we are fortunate that all this happened before the beginning of the contagion, but we expect that next year that will have to change. And so that's another limitation that we try to figure out how to address.
Thank you, Yannis. We are coming right up on the end of our time. I want to once again thank Yannis and Beth and Jay and Bob for facilitating this conversation. The recording and the chat log will be made available to those who are on the call, but also everyone who RSVP'd and was not able to attend. The video will be YouTube that can be accessed, and we have created a discussion forum on engineeringunleashed.com. We will be sharing the link out for that. If you have an account already on that site, you can join the virtual and online learning subnet. And if you don't have an account, it's really easy to create one, and then you can jump in. There's a lot of questions that are still being added into the chat, so we'll turn each of those into conversations on that thread so we can continue this discussion. I want to thank you, everyone, and thank you to our facilitators. I guess at this point, I will say, have a wonderful day. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yes, stay healthy. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.